when she's getting freaking cold clocked at Lollapalooza by Courtney Love. I mean, come on. And she says, I will debate you at the college of your choice.
Welcome to Rock and Roll Book Club, where we discuss books by and about musicians and the music industry. I'm Dave, and on this episode, my co-hosts Shelley and Jen and I are talking about Rebel Girl, My Life as a Feminist Punk, written by the feminist icon and queen of everything, Kathleen Hanna. This book takes us directly into Kathleen's world, from surviving her traumatic childhood to becoming one of the most empowering voices on feminist issues through her music, art, conversation, and downright will to do what is right. Plus some juicy tidbits like how she was responsible for naming one of the most iconic songs of the 90s and how she was cold clocked by Courtney Love at Lollapalooza. A quick content warning. There is colorful language and discussion of sexual abuse ahead. If you're easily offended or triggered by discussion of this type, please proceed with caution and choose who you listen to this with carefully. Thank you.
Everyone, welcome to Rock and Roll Book Club. It's sweltering hot outside, and we're going to have a wonderful conversation on Kathleen Hanna's Rebel Girl. It's an incredible book. We're going to go deeply into this, and we would like to thank everyone for our replacements. Like, we had so many hits. We had over 500. We had over 500 views, right, guys? 500?
Yes.
Yeah, it was the most viewed video that we've done by far. No question.
Yeah. Listen, so and we understand that's small potatoes for YouTube, but considering that we've only had this as a dedicated channel since February, we're feeling very happy and grateful about 500 plus views. It's pretty awesome.
We got some great feedback, so people seem to be appreciating what we're doing, and we're continuing that today with this Bikini Kill. Or I'm sorry, it's not just about Bikini Kill. The Kathleen Hanna book.
We felt that we needed some female energy in book club after dealing with the replacements and my favorite addict, Mark. What was his last name?
Mark Lanigan.
No,
we had Motley Crue. We had Motley Crue, Mark Lanigan, and the replacements in a row, 3 in a row.
Oh, and Paul Stanley.
And Paul Stanley, we had that. And so there was a lot of testosterone going on. We did start off with Susanna Hoffs, Belinda Carlisle, and Britney Spears. At the beginning, Liz Phair.
Yes.
So we started off kind of one way, and then we veered the other way, and now we're veering back. So, that's a key ingredient of this book club.
Although I'll say, I think the reason why we think about Lanigan and Motley Crue and the replacements is how much misbehavior there is in those 3 books. Like, it is a lot of like, oh, this is how the other half lives. I feel so righteous. And while Kathleen Hanna is like a total fucking punk, fuck yeah. She's not like she's using that to do good and not to just like sleep with people.
No, there's spoiler alert on this book. There's not really a whole lot of degenerate behavior on the part of the author of the book. Like, she is not, a drug dealer. She does not, get drunk and spit beer at record executives' faces. All of the shenanigans from those early books, they're not here. It's interesting in a whole other level, the kind of stuff that she ends up having to deal with in her music career, because it is pretty different from, say, the replacements, the Screaming Trees, Kiss, and the other people that we've talked about.
Yeah, but don't get me wrong. She's a complete badass, and there's so much badass behavior in this book that it's inspiring and amazing, and I think very educational.
I do too.
Kathleen Hanna is probably best known as the lead singer of this band, Bikini Kill. This is my OG copy of Pussy Whipped. Amazing record. Pretty extreme. If you're talking about the most legendary punk rock bands in history, and you're talking about the Sex Pistols, the Clash, the Dead Kennedys, Black Flag, if you're not mentioning Bikini Kill in that same conversation, you're ignorant, or you're just being a dick, because they are at that level of just greatness. When you listen, I'm not saying every song, but like a song like Rebel Girl or a song like New Radio or whatever are at that same level that anything Black Flag or the Sex Pistols did in their heyday. So it is pretty incredible and pretty intense music. Here's a little 7-inch from Bikini Kill that I have here, and Reject All American on CD. Now, I don't by any means have all their stuff, but they were a really revolutionary feminist punk rock band from the 90s. They used to get a lot more press than they actually had fans or were known as a band, right? So they'd be featured in like major mainstream newspapers and magazines, although Kathleen Hanna didn't participate in any kind of interview with them, but they'd get written about. But when you went to see them, they're still playing in these dingy little clubs and whatever. Like in their heyday, in their period, they never really achieved all that much in terms of, mainstream music success. After that band broke up at the end of the 90s, she started doing some solo work. She called herself Julie Ruin. And then that became known as, the Julie Ruin when it sort of transferred more into a band than just her doing solo stuff. At the same time, she formed another band called La Tigra, which is more dancey and a little more fun and poppy, but still very feminist and very, you know, same kind of I don't want to say it's the same kind of lyrical concept because Bikini Kill was really angry and aggressive, and this is just more pro women and very positive and stuff like that. Different vibe, but it just shows the evolution of Kathleen Hanna. And then she didn't do anything for about a decade, but now she is back with both La Tigra and Bikini Kill. But bottom line is, I mean, when you're talking about the best punk rock singers in history, you're talking about Iggy Pop, you're talking about Henry Rollins, Jello Biafra, Johnny Rotten, and you have to throw Kathleen Hanna in that mix because she just is that good. And I feel like if you're not putting her on that list, you're being a dick or you're just never heard it. I mean, I see that as there's no other way of
you're a misogynist. Congratulations.
You're just a jerk, dude. I mean, come on.
Or as you said, uninformed. But hey, that's why we're here, right?
So there you go. That's the Kathleen Hanna. Not a ton of output, to be honest. I mean, her career started in the early 90s, and there's maybe, half a dozen, close to maybe 10 albums in overall in about 30 years. So not the most prolific, but that's also part of the book is kind of her struggles with recording and stuff like that. So those are in the book.
I think something else to think about is that genre. I mean, that's not a mainstream genre. Do you know what I'm saying? Like you're not going I mean, it is to a certain degree, but like, you're not going to be played on radio. You're going to be in a jukebox at a freaking kick-ass bar.
Yeah.
But I think,
Bikini Kill didn't last long enough to possibly cross over into another era. Like the same way, like Nirvana was a little more extreme at the beginning, and then they kind of ultimately, maybe Bikini Kill could have at some point. They certainly did have catchier songs. Not everyone is just a screamer or whatever. There are catchier Bikini Kill tunes, and maybe with the right production and with the right studio and with the right but it didn't happen. The times were different back then, and it didn't happen for them. They left behind some great shit, but it's definitely not the most accessible music that you're gonna find out there.
But regardless, she's a freaking badass bitch.
I was very aware of Kathleen Hanna prior to reading this book. If we weren't in this book club, I probably would have ultimately ended up reading the book at some point anyways. I do find her very, very fascinating. I did see Bikini Kill back in the 90s, and so I have been kind of, aware of what she does for a long time. This book was very interesting to me. I didn't know a lot about her personal life and her upbringing and stuff like that. I only really knew her career. And you get a lot of both in the book. It's a good mix.
Yeah. Shelley?
I knew about Bikini Kill, was not like a huge fan or anything. I really didn't know anything about Kathleen Hanna or what a fucking badass she is. I had no idea that she would become the queen of my world. Uh, so yeah, I was basically starting from scratch, I would say. Like you, Jen. I don't think I knew much more about her than you did.
She was raised between Maryland and Seattle, like the Pacific Northwest. She has a sister whose name is Good Times. We really don't know what becomes of Good Times, but she had a pretty hard childhood.
We didn't
And
even really get the real name of Good Times.
you
Like
never
they
Yeah,
never
we
say
never
her
got-
actual name. And Kathleen's nickname as a kid was Little Good Times because she was the little sister of Good Times. But we don't really ever find out who Good Times actually was.
Well,
They're
it's her
estranged
sister.
and yeah.
Yeah, we don't
Well,
know
it's
her
her
real
sister,
name.
right. What
And they're
happened to
estranged
her? I mean,
now.
they're estranged, and so we just don't know much of the story.
And I
Well,
imagine
and
that's
also-
why we don't get her name, is
Probably.
because she can't say, heads up, here's a copy of the book, or doesn't want to, you know.
Well, I'm going to say I hope Good Times is doing well, and I wish her the best. So,
Same.
great Good Times.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can we
so-
say why she was called Good Times? Because I think this is one of the
Yes,
first,
go ahead. Yes,
the first ways that she
Shelley,
broaches, you know, the sort of our feminist education in this book is that her sister was called a slut all the time because she had big boobs for her age. And so she kind of talks about like, oh, so just because like she has bigger boobs than the other girls, that means she should be called a slut. Like she wasn't a slut. And it made her sister become pretty defensive, rightfully so. But so anybody familiar with the song Suck My Left One, that's what her sister would say back to people when they called her a slut or gave her shit in any way. She'd say, suck my left one. So that's sort of an origin story there. But, you know, I think it's really cool how she points out that like this kind of unfair treatment of women, this objectification of women starts so early. And it's a really important thing for people to understand because sometimes, you know, like when you're in it, I didn't realize that as a kid, but you know, looking back at things, it's like, holy shit. Like,
well, and I think that there's some ways with that where her father was just horrible, just a rotten, creepy, inappropriate, abusive, just a really, really bad dude. And she knew from an early age what her mother was going through with him and how embarrassing he was. And he'd hit on the waitresses and he would always make a scene. And, you know, I think from an early age out of the gate, she started dealing with that immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah, because of her own dad.
Yeah. And this is what I'm going to say is that she found her voice at a young age. And that I think you can attribute to a couple of things. First of all, what her mom was going through with the father, what the father was putting everyone through, and what she saw her sister going through. I mean, she out of the gate just started defending herself, defending women. And I think her strength obviously came from what the environment she was in.
Unfortunately, yeah,
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
probably true. Will you
Yeah.
talk just a little bit more about the dynamic of the mom and the dad so
Yes.
people understand? Because I think it's important.
Well,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, it was a terrible marriage. Seems like kind of a loveless marriage where the dad was like a drunk and there were a lot of mentions of the idea of incest being involved in the family. Now, there wasn't an explicit accusation this happened this way, but there was a lot of implication. There was a lot of incredibly inappropriate behavior. There was a lot of stuff that now would maybe get you put in jail, but back in the 1970s, perhaps wouldn't. He also did stuff like threatened to commit suicide in front of his whole entire family. And the girls learned to kind of coddle dad and be nice to him and be sweet to him because that calmed him down and that made it so he wouldn't act up as much. And that's sort of a learned behavior about women learning to deal with a violent, angry male, it's one lesson to learn from it. There's other ways of learning from it, but I mean, from childhood, Kathleen Hanna was having to deal with angry, aggressive men in her face like all the time. And so, yeah, it has been constant since she was little, all the way up through to probably the present day. There are just people who, she's just had to deal with that shit. Now, you would think that would make her like a really angry, unfun person, but by all accounts, she seems really nice. And like when you see her in interviews nowadays, she seems really, really fun and like, so it's great that she's not really, she wasn't so permanently damaged or whatever by those early childhood experiences. But yeah, she's been dealing with that shit from before there was ever even recognition of what the hell was going on in that household.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
And she would have every right to be a completely bitter person because of those challenges she faced as a young person. And also after that, I'll just add also that not only did her dad threaten to kill himself, but he actually like had a gun, like went outside, shot it. They thought he'd killed himself. He waited and then came back into the house and said, "Aren't you glad I'm alive? See what it would feel like if I killed myself." And he's still holding a gun. And Kathleen's mom has to send her and Good Times over to basically like kiss his ass and tell him how much they love him in order for him to put the gun away. I mean, that's so fucking traumatic. And on top of that, her dad would pull shit like sleep in bed with her, like make her sleep in the bed with him and like spoon. Can you imagine having to spoon with your dad or your mom? Like,
no, couldn't imagine.
God.
No.
Couldn't imagine it.
I mean, it's fucked up.
I think, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I believe he abused Good Times. I believe he probably, there might have, it sounded from everything that there was some sexual abuse with him and some incest towards
it. Might have been, and maybe that's part of the reason why her name is not mentioned also, because you just don't want to put accusations with names and make it real specific in print, because maybe you could get in legal trouble for doing that, whatever. And what are the standards of proof from the 1970s? It's probably smart just to keep it kind of vague and to just set up the scenario. And then this is, you put 2 and 2 together and what's going to happen. You get 4, but we don't have to explicitly say it.
Yeah, which is a very kind choice on her part.
Absolutely.
She did give her dad multiple chances too. I mean, she hated him, but then also moved back in with him at some point when she had a fight with her mom, and then went to work for him at the car dealership or car plate, whatever he was doing at the time as a job. And she was working as a receptionist there or whatever. And so she gave the dad more chances. He just fucked up every single time. He was a jerk 100% of the time.
Completely inappropriate. I
actually had a moment where I was like, who's worse, her dad or Vince Neil? And now I think the answer is probably Vince Neil, but I'm not kidding. I legit thought about it. I was like, this fucking piece of shit.
I don't think Kathleen's dad killed anybody, so maybe Vince will ultimately always be on top because he did actually kill somebody. But yeah, besides that, he's maybe the worst character we've dealt with so far.
Yeah, I agree.
Or the other guy, Darren, who is a future discussion. But anyways,
Darren.
As far as the character of the shittiest character that we've dealt with this is our 10th book. Those are the top 2 probably.
Loved how she found her talent so early on in her childhood. She went to a theater camp. Her retrospective of her youth and the relationships and finding like the hierarchy of breaking into talent at that young age was absolutely just so spot on and just so aware. So you've got this girl who realizes she's got a talent, and then she's trying to find a way to get that out. And of course she found her way, whether it was through her art or through her voice. And I just thought, I thought that was pretty incredible. She seems like, go ahead.
I'd say it's pretty fascinating that she did have that sort of musical theater background, and did like Annie and shit like that because she can actually sing, right? I understand that in punk rock, that's not a requirement. You don't have to have a great voice, but in quieter moments in her music, in Julie Ruin and in certain Bikini Kill, you can tell she has a really, really good voice.
Yeah.
She is a good singer.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Oh, yeah.
it's not just, she's not just a good singer for punk. She's a good singer in general. And knowing that about her background was like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. She did have a little bit of training and she worked in that kind of world a little bit as a kid and in high school and stuff like that. So I did find that pretty interesting.
I did too.
2 points on that I'd like to make. One is that shows what a badass she is. Like, she was working it as a little kid. And I think what we need on this episode is, instead of the blowjob counter, we might need the badass counter, because I think I'm going to say it like 1,400 more times.
Every time you say it, there's a bell go off.
Yeah. She's a
I don't think there was any blowjobs or any Garys in this book.
No blowjobs, and disappointingly, no Garys.
No. There was references. There were hand job references that Kathleen did make about getting their truck fixed or something, and she was willing to do it. I think she was joking, actually, but point is, it was mentioned. You know, that she did mention it. So
yes. Yeah. That's very mild considering our Motley Crue
just considering book. Like, take one chapter of the Motley Crue book versus the entirety of all these other books.
Yeah.
You know what you're talking about here.
Oh, yeah. And then the other thing I wanted to say about Annie is that she has this moment where she's the lead and she's amazing and she feels so good about herself and like she's figured out like what she's great at. And then her dad says, let's go get ice cream, which she recognizes is shorthand for, you did something great. And she's so excited that he's recognizing that. And then this fucking dirtbag says, anybody who embarrasses themselves in front of that many people deserves ice cream. Yeah. This is a child. Like,
terrible.
What? I mean, that is a thing. Totally, that's yet another traumatic thing that can impact a young person for their whole lives.
No, that's the kind of crap that like Mark Lanigan's dad said to him when he was little. Like, just, you're a piece of shit and I'm just going to undermine you no matter what. That was a fucking ridiculous comment that her dad said.
Was it hypocritical that she was a stripper to put herself through college? And I mean,
I would defer to you two first. I do have thoughts on that. I think we're all going to be on the same page personally, but I will defer to you two first.
I'm happy to weigh in on that.
Okay.
Yeah. So, you know, I understand that some people thought that because they see stripping or sex work as demeaning to women. And it certainly can be. I had a roommate who worked at a strip club, and the shit that she would tell me, it was just insane. The things that these guys would say to her, like, just disgusting, just take away all your faith in humanity kind of shit.
Sure.
So like, I understand that aspect of it, but to me, she's absolutely not a hypocrite, because feminism means that as a woman, you can do whatever the fuck you want. Okay. Like, that you have the right to use your body the way you want to use your body. And especially in this setting where she is just trying so hard to move her life forward. And like, this is a way that you can make money fast as a woman. That's not her fault. Like, blame society for that shit, you know?
Don't hate the player, hate the game.
Right, exactly. So to me, you know, she's absolutely not a hypocrite. She's, what am I going to say?
She's a badass.
She's a
total badass. Total badass.
Not a hypocrite.
Listen, she did what she had to do. You know, it seemed as though she always seemed to have her dignity and herself intact with what she was doing, and she got her shit paid for. Yep. That's her choice, and that's what she did. And that's what she did.
Look, I'm on the same page as you guys. I don't see her as being a hypocrite. at all. I mean, it happens. And yeah, there's this sort of empowering side of being a dancer, and you get some of those women who, yeah, they're in complete control and this is like a way to make some quick money. And then there are people who it's more of a tragedy and it's a sad story, and that's the only real options that they have. You can't just take the worst case scenario and apply it to everybody and make thing that she's being exploited and whatever. She wasn't. Um, the one thing that I was surprised about was how far along into her career she was still doing it. So, for example, Bikini Kill was already a band and touring around the country. And when they moved back to Washington, she started dancing again. Now, I had no idea. I thought that was like a college thing. She's 18, 19 years old, making money for school. This was post school. This was Bikini Kill. And she still did. She talked about the club in Seattle, the Razzmatazz or some shit, and told stories about it. Like, so my feeling on it is she saw it as this sort of, yeah, it's a quick way to make money, but also she didn't seem to really hate it as much as you would think. So she talked about it wasn't entirely a negative experience when she was recounting doing that. So it was an interesting attitude. That was a big debate in the 90s as to whether stripping or porn or whatever was just strictly exploiting women and it's anti-women, anti-feminist, or is there another angle to it that it can actually be sort of empowering and whatever. And I don't know where people lie on that. It's not really for me to say. But is she a hypocrite about it? No, I don't think so. She didn't go around criticizing strippers or sex workers and then find out, oh, she's doing it herself. That would make her a hypocrite.
Right. Yes.
Okay, but just doing it her period. How I don't understand how that makes her a hypocrite at all. It doesn't make sense. To me.
Yeah, agreed.
Question, and I wanted to pose it to all of us. And
I think it's a really good question because there were other feminists that were part of their own movement, in particular the Riot Girl stuff, that were criticizing her, and they were feminists. And it's interesting how they didn't really understand why that wouldn't be hypocritical, and she points that out in the book in a, again, kind and subtle way, but it's like, no, maybe you guys are doing feminism wrong. I don't know. Like maybe if you're like fucking with other feminists, that's not exactly like a feminist thing to do, right?
I feel like when with feminism, it's really hard to win. It's hard to win because everyone has a different opinion of what it is.
Well, there's a lot of movements that are like that too. I mean, you're talking about just the civil rights movement. There's, there's people who are more like the Malcolm X type, who were like more like separate, we don't want to be a part of the society. Then there's the Martin Luther King. No, we want to integrate. We want everybody. Okay. So you have different conflicts inside of different movements, and you ultimately come to some sort of consensus where the sides work it out. And now I don't know what the argument is in 2024 as to whether it can be pro woman or feminist to be a stripper or not. I don't really feel like it's my business to weigh in. I mean, it's
I feel like if it's what you want to do and you're making the money that you want to make, knock yourself out. It's personal choice. That is own feminism. So, exactly. That's just a real hard question to answer. But
and let me just say that my secondhand experience with that career, having lived with someone who worked at a strip club, she was not being taken advantage of. She was manipulating the fuck out of the guys in this club, and she was making bank.
Yeah.
She was the one in charge.
Yeah. And
I believe it doesn't have to just be like, oh, I have to take all this shit from guys because it's the only way I can make money. It's like, no, you can also be a badass and be a stripper and be in charge.
Well, and the fact is, who doesn't complain about people at work? So honestly, if a stripper comes home from work and is like, God, these guys were such a-holes, This one guy was like, just kept yapping away. Okay. Well, you do that at work too, in the office.
Uh-huh.
You know, oh, that guy in accounting just would not shut the fuck up at the Coke machine, whatever.
I
So
mean, there are
I
fewer
didn't see it as
boners
that
though.
different. You know what I mean? What?
There are fewer boners though.
Well,
Yeah.
you'd
far as
hope so.
You know.
You'd hope so.
She found her, I don't want to say the word calling, but I'll say it, helping people. She became someone, and this started in college when her roommate was raped, and that was freaking awful and terrible. And she was there for her roommate, and helped her. And she knew what to do in a situation where someone was raped, abused, assaulted, what have you. And I really love her compassion and her drive and her kindness, to let everyone who experienced something like that be heard.
Mhm.
And I think that was where she really started finding herself and her big, her purpose. I really do.
I
Yeah,
agree.
well, she did talk about that, how she worked at a rape crisis center, and it was her friend, there was experience with her friend and all these things. And that was something that was unique to her band and her shows, was that, yeah, she was acting as like a counselor to women who came up to her at the concerts and stuff, especially in the early days. Now she plays big places and she's probably pretty hard to approach. But back then, you could just walk right up to her. And yeah, she would spend hours after the gig talking to people, counseling them or whatever. So yeah, that's a pretty intense thing to have to do every single day, plus be a performer. And and those performances were not tame. I mean, she got up there and just fucking went crazy. So, you know, pretty she's unique in rock and roll in that respect. As far as I know, it was mostly about, in Olympia and meeting like-minded people. I mean, I think she met Toby first.
Mhm.
They were friends. They decided, hey, let's form a band. And Toby was a more serious musician from what I recall from the book. Um, Kathy Wilcox was also the other member, and I think she initially was playing bass and she switched, or playing guitar, then she switched to bass. Kathleen Hanna was initially playing an instrument for a while before she became the singer. And again, Billy, the guitar player, was just more a recommendation. And I think that's funny, and it's often overlooked that Bikini Kill wasn't an all-woman band. They weren't like the Go-Go's or the Bangles or whatever. There was a man in the band who played guitar, and Kathleen credits him in the book as saying his guitar riffs are a big part of what make the sound of Bikini Kill. Now, I think Kathleen Hanna's voice, her lyrics, her whole attitude is really what makes Bikini Kill Bikini Kill. Okay, let me just put that out there first. But from a musical perspective, she's right. Without those guitar riffs, there aren't songs. But as far as and they were just friends at from the early days from Olympia, Washington.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, it wasn't Billy their roommate, and they were like, "Hey, you," or in the corner, "You want to be in the band?"
That could have been, yeah. Some of
That's
those
how
details I
remember
kind
it,
of
whether
forgot
that's
because
accurate or not.
there were so many people in so many different bands, and then Kathleen, which I didn't realize, she had been in two other bands prior to Bikini Kill, and one of them actually toured around the country. Like, that was new information to me. I had no idea that she had done touring as a member of another band prior. So that, again, that was the revelation. I just didn't know that. I'd never heard that about her.
So in the book, she lives in a building and meets one. It's her neighbor, right? Darren is
Yeah,
her
no,
neighbor.
it's in
Yeah.
Olympia, which is a small town, and I think they were in the same apartment building.
Yeah, so she has a friendship with this man named Darren. I think he's a little older than her, if I remember correctly. And he really becomes a trusted friend of hers. She shares everything with him, including stories of having been raped and assaulted and really personal stuff. And they had an incredibly close relationship, so close that really that relationship she had with him sort of is what made her want to quit drinking, because she was hanging out with Kurt Cobain and somebody else, and they were getting wasted. And she said something about, oh yeah, Darren, he's just this like older guy that takes care of me. Like, I don't, whatever. And
It
really
seemed real dismissive and kind of
yeah,
mean. Yeah.
yeah, diminished their relationship, and he heard it.
Mhm.
And she felt so incredibly badly that she had done that because he was such a good friend and confidant for her, that she realized, like, hey, I got to knock it off with getting wasted. Eventually, she knows this guy for like, what, a couple years.
It seems like it stretched over multiple years.
And so then she's about to move out of this apartment complex, and her and Darren are laying in bed together, which they had done many times. And that was just kind of their relationship. Like, she took baths at his house and whatever. And I think that they were hugging and talking about how they'll, miss each other. And all of a sudden, he just slips it in. And she's like, whoa, wait, like, this isn't that. There's no lead up to this. There's no like kissing. There's no anything that would indicate she had an interest in it. And he just puts his fucking dick inside of her
Rapes her.
and
Yeah.
rapes her. And it's it's bad enough that fucking dudes do that all the time, that they just like, there's no consent, they just assume things like that. But also just made all the worse because they had such a close friendship, and she thought that he was the one really good guy she knew, like that he was the person she could trust. And he knew about her previous rape. And then what does he do? He does the same fucking thing. Like, oh,
Yeah, guy's a piece of shit. It changes everything. But I did sort of think a certain way about Darren up until that point. And then it was like,
Yeah.
okay, fuck him. What a loser piece of shit.
Mhm.
Irredeemable.
Yeah.
Like, you have to wonder if that's your attitude then. Maybe that was the entire time. Were you just playing the long game here, or
That's what it felt like.
what was your
Mhm.
angle there? You know what I mean?
Terrible. It was
And talk about boundaries. He crossed the ultimate boundary.
Yeah.
Like, who gives a fuck about what happened before that? Like, she did not give him permission to do
No.
what he did. Like,
absolutely.
no.
Yeah, that was a hard part of the book. I mean, normally we're like laughing our asses off at skeezy Vince Neil and freaking, Pamela Anderson and Tommy Lee letters. Like, this was a heavy book.
It doesn't seem like it was a ton of fun back in the 90s for
No.
her. And it's unfortunate that so much of that time was tainted, but it also at the same time makes that music exist. I mean, if it didn't happen that way and she didn't have those experiences, we wouldn't have that music. You can't just academically think about a song like Rebel Girl or whatever, or Suck My Left One. It's not something you can learn in a feminist textbook. Like, you have to live that. These are lived experiences that she's largely talking about in my opinion, my interpretation of her songs.
And
Yeah.
I think that that's what makes it so necessary to have music like that, and to have a punk feminist movement. Guess what? If guys, all behaved themselves, we wouldn't fucking need that music, would we? I mean, it's still great music, but
No, but it's like stuff that.
do.
Oh, I'm
Oh, go
sorry.
ahead.
I was going to say
No, go ahead.
some things about that people back then seemed like to have such an issue with, when she would say girls at the front, girls come to the front
Yeah.
of the stage,
Yeah.
guys
Yes.
move back. Okay, now she did that at the time when I saw Bikini Kill. Was I offended? No. If she says we want girls to come up to the front so they can see what's going on or whatever and not have to deal with mosh pits and whatever, guys move back. first of all, most men are taller anyways, so they can see over. There's nothing more annoying than some tall douchebag standing in front of you at a concert. Whether they're violent or creepy or not, they're tall and they're in your way, and it's
Yes.
distracting to me. So that was seen as like, oh my gosh, she's so confrontational or whatever. Really? I mean, people were just babies back then. I mean, men, for the most part. They really
Well, and
were.
it's like, oh, so guys, you're pissed off because you have to move to the back one time. It's
Yeah.
like, try being a girl. Like, it's like, no, we have to deal with that shit every time. Like fighting to see, not fighting, trying to find a way to just be able to see the band
Yeah.
because there's a pit in front or because there's fucking tall dudes or whatever. Like, yeah, sorry that you have to deal with that one time. Like,
Yeah.
we deal
But I
with it
love that she
all
did
the
that.
time.
I just love that she did that though. I
Yeah.
loved what her intent was, and it was to help, and it was to support, and it was to just, be there for all women.
And
And
empower
Yeah.
them.
She wasn't saying men can't be at the show. I mean,
yeah,
or
no,
don't
not at
enjoy
all.
the
She's
music. It
saying
was just
that.
like move back a few
By
steps. I
far.
mean, give a little bit of and it's like, man, people don't know what it was like, but if you weren't there, but the 90s, those are some violent mosh pits at shows. And it got to a
Yeah.
point where even a band as weak as like Stone Temple Pilots would get like a mosh pit because that's just what people thought you're supposed to do at a concert. Like I'm supposed to elbow you in
Yeah.
the face and I'm supposed to kick you and I'm supposed to do that shit. It's like I never liked it. And as a man, I always backed up anyways because I didn't want any part of that. And I loved it when bands would tell people to stop doing that. And the worst is when they pass you over the top of the crowd because that's just, first of all, if you're a woman, you're getting groped no matter what. And if you're a guy, I mean, you're kicking your leg. People get kicked in the face. Why is that fun?
I
Well,
don't know.
I have to tell you that I have crowd surfed before.
They're fun.
It was so fucking fun.
Really? Okay. Well,
Yeah, I mean, there's like the fear that you're gonna just get dropped, but like my experience with it was really good. Uh yeah, but at the same time, like I also participated in mosh pits and shit too. I was like, fuck it, I don't care. I'm a mad teenager. I'm gonna go get fucked up. But yeah, but it's not a hospitable environment for women, especially because dudes are wearing fucking combat boots and they're bigger than you and you're like small and all the things. So yeah.
yeah, and it was so much more frequent back then. Maybe I'm just not going to the right shows these days. I mean, I'm in my 50s. I'm not at every show, but I was sort of whenever moshing breaks out at a show where I am these days, I'm just like, "Hello, moving back." Like
Oh,
get
me
out of the
too, to be
way.
clear.
I leave.
My crowd surfing days have been over for decades. I'm curious if I'm going to assume, Jen, and tell me if I'm wrong, that there wasn't any bad male behavior that was truly shocking to you, that seemed outside of your lived experience or that of people that you know.
Well, I wouldn't say, well, Darren shocked me. I was
Well,
not.
Darren shocked me too, but that is
That's
within my own lived experience, to be clear. Like that shit happens. That's not a one-off.
No, I know. No, I think you're right. I think I'm with you on that. Her father and that behavior but anything really shocking? I don't
I think
know.
the dad was shocking, but
He was
beyond that,
shocking.
I'm like, yep, I've heard of that or I've experienced that. But Dave,
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you had any moments that were really enlightening to you about how men treat women. Like, to be clear, everybody, Dave's a great guy and very respectful of women. So, like, he's not a douchebag that's like, well, fuck yeah, you just like,
I am not a
just stick it
douchebag.
in.
It's true.
You're not a
Um,
douchebag, Dave.
You're
I
not a
don't think
douchebag.
We wouldn't
I
be
don't
doing
think
this
I
with
was
you
I
if you
don't think
were.
I was very I mean, I know a lot of that stuff happens, okay? And I know a lot of these kinds of things take place. I know that. Okay.
Yeah.
And I do know one or two people to whom they can say that they have experienced some type of assault or whatever. The idea, just a lot of things like that, sexual assault, domestic violence. I wasn't raised around any of that, fortunately.
Yeah.
So I have no firsthand knowledge of it. It's all knowing about hearing stories and that sort of thing. So it's all a little bit shocking, but it's also just how could it? I mean, when you find out that someone that you thought was a normal person does something like that, you're just like, wow. I mean, there's no turning back. It's like, I don't want to know you ever again. I'm done.
Hmm.
There's no, let me hear your side. There isn't your side. I mean, who cares? I mean, not interested. So I don't
Well,
know. That's my perspective on it. I don't know.
and
I,
go ahead.
I just wish that I think that less woke. I don't want to use that. I think that men that aren't as considerate as you are, Dave, I think many of them would be surprised that these things happen. Or maybe not because they're douchebags. I'm not sure. But I really do think that one of the important things that Kathleen Hanna does in this book is to expose what it's like to be a woman and to especially be a woman who stands up for herself and is an outspoken feminist and punk rocker. And I think that a lot of men would not, I think that they just wouldn't realize how much shit women put up with all the fucking time. But if they listen to this book, they would begin to understand that.
And I
And
also think
maybe
on that same note, sorry to interrupt,
it's okay.
but it's about like okay, I didn't think that that kind of stuff happened as much in the punk rock world. I think what was eye-opening to me was that her problems with people or people that did this kind of stuff, it wasn't strictly like, oh, the jocks at school or these kinds of typical guys who are the same sort of problematic figures you find in all of these kind of stories. This was even in the punk rock scene. These are supposed to be more enlightened people who are more about free expression and they're not about the norms of society and this and that. And you find
Yeah,
out
being yourself.
that some of these guys do the same shit and harbor those same attitudes. That was very like disheartening to find out. And that
Yeah.
was surprising to me to find out that there was so much of that in the Northwest music community, which you think of as being more enlightened. Not everyone was Kurt
Yeah.
Cobain, right? Not everyone was as
Right.
progressive and forward thinking as he was. There were a lot of
Mhm.
people who weren't. And just because you make good music, I guess doesn't mean that you're also that sort of forward thinking person either. And that was sort of eye opening for me.
When they finally went on tour with the Beastie Boys, which we'll get to, the roadie, she had the issue with the roadie, or was it the roadie or manager who was just like
No,
all
that
over
was their
her?
friend. Okay, that's funny because
Oh,
Ricky Powell is the person you're talking about, who was the
yes,
friend who was like being real skeezy with women, and she got
yes.
him kind of kicked off the tour. There is a Beastie Boys song, something, something, throw in the towel. Your girl got dicked by Ricky Powell. Okay, it's on License to Ill. He has been friends with those guys since the old days. This was years later. He's Mr. Good Time guy hanging out with the Beastie Boys. And then once they found out specifically what was going on, when she saw it was, he wasn't on the next tour. But that was just no roadie, no tour manager.
Yeah,
That was
okay,
like an
okay.
old school friend. And he is name checked in a song with the line, your girl got dicked by Ricky Powell. So that makes me think they also were kind of aware of kind of guy he was and sort of overlooked it. And that's kind of the other thing. You can be an enlightened guy and you can just sort of look the other way when your friends are doing something shitty. That's clearly what was happening with the Beastie Boys prior to the integration of Kathleen Hanna into their life, is what it sort of looked like to me.
Mhm.
Mhm.
This is why you are the brains of the book club. Not that Shelley and I are not the brains. You are like the historian. You are the historian. You're
Oh,
the
when I
historian.
heard that name, my ears perked up. I was like, oh, I've heard that name before. How do I know that guy? You know?
It's just
That's
okay.
so interesting.
So the drummer of Bikini Kill, Toby Vale, was dating Kurt Cobain. And this was prior to Courtney Love, and it was prior to Nevermind. Now, there's a lot of rumors that some of the songs on Nevermind were written about Toby. I don't know that that's ever been confirmed. Kathleen Hanna sort of suggested that, but I don't know that that's actually true or not. Doesn't matter. So they were friends, and this was pre-famous Kurt Cobain, and Kurt did a lot of things that helped out Bikini Kill and Kathleen. It wasn't strictly just that he dated Toby Vale, because they played at her art gallery that she was trying to get set up as a benefit. Nirvana came and played. He did other things. He brought Bikini Kill to open for them. And it's a Blu-ray, it's a Blu-ray video, but it's them at the Paramount 1991 Halloween. Bikini Kill was the opener on that show. Like, I still have the Blu-ray. I watch it all the time. It's great. So he did a lot of stuff to help them out. They were good friends. The infamous thing that ties Kathleen Hanna to Nirvana is that her and Toby Vale went to a store and they bought that deodorant, the female deodorant brand called Teen Spirit.
They didn't buy it. They saw it and were making fun of the name.
Okay.
Because what does Teen Spirit smell like?
Yeah.
Do we know?
It was called Teen Spirit. I remember
it too. Yeah.
Right. No, I kind of remember it too.
Know what the deodorant smelled like, but conceptually,
but they made a joke. They made a joke that yeah, like if Toby was wearing it, then Kurt would also smell like it. So they were writing stuff on the walls in his apartment, graffiti and whatnot, and she wrote Kurt smells like Teen Spirit as a joke. And that ultimately stuck in his head and later on became the song Smells Like Teen Spirit. Now, if you note in the song Smells Like Teen Spirit, they never actually say the words Smells Like Teen Spirit. Could have been called anything. So that title is infamous simply because it was so good. It just became the title, even though they don't even say those words in the song.
Yeah. And I believe that was the same night that she said the stuff about Darren, because they were so wasted. They'd been like graffitiing places, and then they were like drinking all night at Kurt's place, and that's when she wrote it on the wall. And then the next day she was like, oh boy, I feel like death and I should not do this to myself or my friends anymore. And amazingly, I mean, yeah, it seems like she has stayed California sober since then. So that's cool.
Well, there was a weird incident with her and Kurt Cobain that I didn't fully understand. She talked about how they would talk about feminism and stuff like that, and she gave him a book to read, and she thinks he was like offended by it.
Oh, yeah.
And they stopped being close, and it was like I didn't really get that, and I'm not sure she was correct in her interpretation. I don't know. Look, I wasn't there. She was. She knows the circumstance. But it seemed like the way it was relayed that she gave him some book about feminism and he looked at it like, oh, you think you're like some educated person and you're trying to educate me, some high school dropout? You think I'm an idiot or whatever, and was offended by that. I don't know. I look, like I just said a second ago, I wasn't there. I don't know, but that seemed very weird and a strange thing to be offended by. And I don't know, that was a very odd part of the book.
I have to say, I've had an experience like that where,
really?
And it comes from, I think, I don't know for sure, but like in that instance, probably Kurt had been given shit by who knows who about not going to college or, being a dumb loser. It's probably some bullshit that people have spewed at him in the past. And so instead of seeing this gift from a friend, this as a gift, this book, he's like, what do you think? I'm fucking stupid? I don't need your fucking book. I'm smart. I know this shit. And I think it's just something that was triggering for him. And I really have been in a very, very similar situation where, someone has gotten upset when I thought I was doing something nice and like paying them a compliment. And there's just a sensitivity there that like I didn't understand, but then I did, after that. And I think to me, it just seems like he was sensitive and she had no idea she was crossing a line and he just like reacted.
Oh, well, okay. Then that makes more sense then. It just seemed to come out of nowhere when I heard that. I was just like, why is she, and I don't think they spoke really. Wasn't that the last time they actually talked? Because she didn't. She had an opportunity to call him before he died, and she's like, Kurt doesn't want to hang out with me. His life is different. Courtney hates me. Whatever. I don't want to deal with that. And then I don't think they ever spoke again. Well, I know that was upsetting to her later on.
Yeah.
When he died, that they never really kind of mended fences. But that is weird that you could have that kind of misunderstanding. I guess I've just never experienced it, so that's why it seemed kind of out of place for me. But
yeah, I have to say, all these stories that we've encountered through these books, Mark Lanigan, Dave Grohl, Kathleen Hanna, about their last words with Kurt or experiences with Kurt, or rather for Kathleen and Mark, the chances they had to speak with him that they opted not to. It's just so heartbreaking. I mean, I don't know that any of it would have mattered, but to carry around that regret and sadness, it just breaks my heart.
Yeah, agreed. And we can blame Courtney Love. It's Lollapalooza 1995, right?
yes.
And Courtney Love's performing. And have you guys ever seen Courtney Love or Hole perform live?
I've seen them 3 times, actually.
And?
Yeah. Back in the day when she was off the rails. It was cool. I like Hole's music. At least Pretty on the Inside, and the first that's Pretty on the Inside, and then the one Live Through This, I think are both really great albums. I like and respect her on a musical level. Her personal behavior most of the time and some of the shit that she does is so ridiculous. And unlike with Kathleen Hanna, who gets a lot of crap of people getting in her face and wanting to confront her, Courtney Love, I think, brings it on more herself.
Yeah.
She antagonizes people and tries to get them to get in her face. It's different. It's a different vibe. And that incident backstage at Lollapalooza, when she also pointed out that Courtney
Kathleen had just been told, like, Courtney's after you. Yeah. And she's like, oh, okay, what did I do?
And then explain what happened.
So then, I can't remember who Kathleen was with, but they were trying to move her into a different area to protect her from Courtney. And Courtney just walks up and fucking cold clocks her. Just boom. And it sounded like it was pretty bad.
I think, honestly, Courtney Love probably hates her from Smells Like Teen Spirit. I think Courtney Love probably hates any female that was remotely near Kurt Cobain.
I got the feeling that she resented their relationship for some reason.
Absolutely. Women supporting women believe in women.
It's tough.
It's real tough. And when you're lucky enough to find someone incredible, a female that you can, even in the workplace, even a friendship, even in the Shelley and I clicked right away. We had each other.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just hard. I think with women, and especially successful women, Courtney was jealous. Courtney is just mean. Courtney's just, I hate Courtney. I think she's a piece of shit.
It strikes me as the kind of person who is like, I'm going to make you hate me before you can just decide that you don't like me. Like, it's a defense mechanism, like getting in the face of, like, probably she was jealous of Kathleen or admired her or both, and it's like I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, but some people just have such insecurities that that's like their defense mechanism, is like, I'll hurt you before you hurt me, and then I'm safe.
I have one thing that I wanted to point out. It's another lyrical reference that kind of complicates the time frame in Kathleen Hanna's story about their relationship. Okay. Now, when they talk about how she met, she did acknowledge that Adam Horovitz, King Adrock, was married at the time when they met. Yeah. Married to, by the way, Ione Skye, the actress from Say Anything.
Was her.
Holy shit. I loved that woman back when I was in high school.
I had no idea.
Okay, so that's insane that's who he was married to. Now, they met on like a Lollapalooza, whatever, and she was very aware that he was married, and they didn't have any kind of, intimacy or anything for a little while.
They just skateboarded together.
They hung out. They were doing intimate type things, just not sexually intimate, but they were definitely doing something that if you're married, you're not supposed to be having that kind of, behavior with another woman when you're, married, but whatever. Point is, they talk about how he was separating from his wife and he wasn't involved in the marriage and whatever. Now, there is a song on the Beastie Boys 1994 album called Get It Together. And it's Q-Tip from A Tribe Called Quest does the line, so it's not one of the Beastie Boys. But he says, Adrock is down with the Ione. Something, 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 both of them is bony. Now, that is in 1994 when supposedly their marriage was over and now he's involved with Kathleen Hanna. Well, if they're putting that line on their 1994 album, don't you think if their marriage was over, Adrock would be like, you know what, we're going to take that line off the song. I don't want any reference to my former wife. I say it was a reference to his current wife, and there's a little drama going on. Now, I'm not an investigative reporter. I don't care. It's not my business. I just think there is something that she's leaving out. It didn't make the cut of the book with regards to that scenario. That's all I'm going to say on it.
Juicy. Dave bringing the hot goss.
Yeah, I'm bringing the juice on this one.
Thank you. I just I like her so much and I respect her so much. I don't really want to gossip about her. So I'll let Dave do it. That's fine.
There wasn't beyond gossip. That's about it. I mean, Adrock is a good guy. And I mean, he comes off as a great guy on a personal level. I love the Beastie Boys musically. I think they were fucking phenomenal. And I wondered if you noticed this, Jen. There were a couple of instances where Kathleen Hanna threw out Yiddish phrases. She was talking about schlepping something or kvetching or whatever. And I'm like, I know you did not talk like that before you got involved with Adam Horovitz. That's when you started hearing those words. And that's when it started being incorporated into your language. I was like, she's practically a member of the tribe at this point. Yeah, but I thought you might have noticed that too, because I definitely
did. Sure is. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I think I'm going to go with her being the ultimate survivor of her book. And I know that that's low-hanging fruit, but I'll tell you, she's a freaking badass. And I love everything about her. And I also think another survivor in the book is her mother, because she has made it clear that they've, repaired the relationship.
Right, they're back to relationship.
Yeah. And, they're spending time together. And and that's what you want at the end of the day.
You know who's my ultimate survivor of the story? Is the music of Bikini Kill, because it is back. It is a band that was left in the ash heap of the 90s, and now Bikini Kill is out on tour. They're going to be on Stephen Colbert's show on Monday. We're taping this a couple, who knows when the video comes out.
What's the date of the show?
Monday the 15th, July 15th. They're playing in front of the biggest crowds they've ever played to in their entire career. The ultimate survivor is that music from that period that was considered so extreme and so toxic and so whatever back at that point. And now she's got 10,000 people singing along, jumping up and down, having a great time. It's all come full circle for that band. I say Bikini Kill is the ultimate survivor.
Yeah. Okay.
Love it.
Yeah. Okay. Shelley, do you have an ultimate survivor?
I have an ultimate who I wish didn't survive, and that's Darren.
Yeah.
Fuck that guy. Did I say that before? Yeah. Fuck that guy.
Yeah, fuck that guy.
His
name should have been Gary, personally.
The fact that, Dave, I'm with you. And just the resurgence of their music and just her being able to tell this incredible story is it was a good read. It was much better than Liz.
Yeah, and she also had, by the way, there's a documentary about her called The Punk Singer that also tells a lot of this story. So there's been a lot of stuff chronicling that period. And what's really sad about that is there isn't a lot of great footage of Bikini Kill back in the 90s. Like, there's a handful of clips that you can find on YouTube, a concert or two here and there that are very, very short. When I saw them, they played less than 30 minutes. So there's very little documentation of that. That's partially due to the fact that back then, not everyone carried a camera with them at all times.
Right.
Second of all, it's just a different world back in the 90s than it is now. But I wish there was more documentation of that stuff, because they were a really, really awesome band, and their recorded output is great, but it's not as great as the intensity of seeing them, in my opinion. And while we're talking about Bikini Kill's music, the song Rebel Girl, which is the title of the book, it's their best song. It's been actually recorded 3 separate times, right? So there's the initial version, Then there's the version on the album Pussy Whipped, and then there's this version on the 7-inch with Joan Jett. Okay.
Oh, we forgot about Joan Jett. Yeah.
This is by far the superior version. This is amazing single. It's big production. It sounds like a rock band doing that song, and it's killer. Okay. I don't know where you can find that version digitally, but you got to find that third version. And the distinction, if you're wondering which version you're listening to, is she changes the lyrics in the third one. Because in the first two, she says, they say she's a slut, but I know she is my best friend. In the third version, she says, they say she's a dyke, but I know she is my best friend. The one with dyke in it is the best version, not because of that, but just side note, that is the best version of the tune.
Okay.
The signature Bikini Kill track.
The lamb of the book.
Adrock.
Adrock.
Okay, yeah, I could say Adrock is the lamb. I could say, yeah, I don't know. I have no objection to that one. Is there a wolf though?
Darren.
I mean, Darren.
Which
The
one?
dad.
The dad.
Darren.
Yeah.
Assholes at the show that are mad that women are going up front. These creepo guys at the strip club probably saying really inappropriate shit.
All the fucking rapists mentioned.
Yeah.
Although
Yeah.
it seems
There's a
like
lot of wolves.
Kathleen probably had more of an issue with the assholes at shows that wouldn't get to the back,
that she did.
than guys at the strip club.
Yeah. I
was
just,
like,
I
she's
threw
there
that
for
in
a
there.
purpose. I'm just doing the job, but your job at the rock show is different, and people interfering with your fucking business,
Yeah.
it still throws me to when you find out that people would get so upset about just being asked to step back a little bit. Big fucking deal. Like, why are you such a fucking baby about it? I don't know.
Okay.
Guys were babies back then, I guess.
Well, and I think the queen wolf of the book is Courtney Love, that dumb whatever. Can't stand her. And what's so funny to me, like the best line of the book, like Kathleen Hanna. So when she's getting freaking cold clocked at Lollapalooza by Courtney Love, I mean, come on. And she says, I will debate you at the college of your choice. How incredible is that? She's like, literally.
She had her line queued up, and she's like, I don't care if I have to say it from the floor after being hit.
I mean, you guys, come on.
No, that was hilarious. That was hilarious.
I need a minute, but before I give my minute, as a good feminist and supporter of women, I would like to share this minute with my amazing co-host, Jen. So, Jen, I'm going to go quickly, and then I would love to hear your minute after that. But my minute, one of the things that really has stuck with me from the book is that, Dave, you brought this up, but we didn't talk about it in depth. After the show, so Kathleen Hanna would, in her music, talk about feminism, talk about sexual abuse. She would talk about those things on stage. She is a feminist punk, so she used that platform as a way to advance the cause of feminism. And so what happened sometimes after those shows is that women would come up to her and say, that's happened to me. And she would take the time to sit and listen to them and coach them and provide them guidance based on the experience that she had working for the, rape and sexual assault or whatever center. And, the thing that it hurts me so badly, and that's why it sticks with me, is that I think we just need to ask ourselves, like, why then for these women? Why do we think they chose that to be the time that they told anybody about their assaults? And I'm asking that rhetorically because I'm going to tell you. And the reason is because it's not safe for women to say those things in many contexts. It's likely, as she tells from the stories, that there will be repercussions for them, like the jock that at this one support group that Kathleen Hanna created, one person said that she had been raped by this guy, and then another person in the same room said, I was too. And why did they not know that? Because this is a kid that's in power. This is a kid that has lots of other guy friends. Like, you'll get trashed. Like, you will get dragged through the mud. You'll be called a liar. People won't believe you. It's actually just adding another layer of trauma to talk about these things happening and to admit to them in public. And it's infuriating to me that that's the case, but also amazing to me that she provided women this outlet and that she could give them a safe place to say these things. And I think people will probably also say that, a place like a rape crisis center is a safe place to say those things. But let me tell you, it's not always. You're talking to a stranger, you're talking to somebody who doesn't know you and you don't know them. I've been to one before, and the guidance that was given was, you probably don't want to bother pressing charges because you're not going to win, and it's just going to be a shitty time for you, and it's just going to hurt more. That person that was being reported went on to rape other women. And this is the shit that enables rape and sexual assault to continue, is that it's so hard for women to report it. It's so hard for these pieces of shit to be outed, even harder for them to be arrested, to be put in jail. I mean, like, hardly any rapists get busted. It's so fucked up.
Do you think it's any better in 2024 than, say, it would have been in 1994 when she was doing that counseling? Do you think it's any better now?
I don't know that it is. I mean, not to get political, but let's look at the women that came out against Bill Cosby. Let's look at the women that came out against Trump. Their reputations have been dragged through the mud. I think that, probably the abuse centers are more educated, and I'm sure that they have evolved. And I'm not saying all of them were or are shitty at all. Like, they're there for a reason and they do really good work. I think that's probably come a long way. I think that there's a lot more sensitivity to how you deal with a rape victim when they're reporting it. A lot of times the process of going through a rape kit and doing all of that is just as, if not more, traumatic than the rape itself. And that's a lot of times the reason women don't report those things. I think that they're starting to actually realize that that's the case and talk about it and do things about it. Do I think it's safe for women to report these things entirely? Absolutely not. I'm not saying that they shouldn't. Everybody should. That's the only way we can make progress and show what a fucking problem this is in our society. But it's incredibly difficult because many women aren't believed. So in conclusion, she's a badass and I love her. Jen, what's your minute?
Well, Shelley, and I thank you for sharing your minute, and I thank you for sharing your minute with me. So there's an example of two women respecting each other and working together.
I love you.
I'm gonna let you. I'm gonna go a different direction. I want to talk about in my minute how she was such a supporter of her fellow bands. I love that she went to see the Go-Go's and was so excited about them. I love what Joan Jett, like, I Love Rock and Roll, I think, is like the worst song, one of the worst songs ever. If I was locked in a torture chamber with that song, and like, oof.
Mine is Let's Get Physical by Olivia Newton-John.
Oh, that's pretty bad. That's
that
pretty
song
bad.
I would, if they could torture me at Guantanamo Bay with that shit. Like,
See, this is where it comes out that I'm a little bit younger than you guys, because both of the songs were the shit for me.
I love that she drew upon the strength of so many women and so many in the music of so many women. And I love her. I think she's freaking amazing. And that is my minute of how she always supported those around her.
Mm-hmm. I love that too.
Yeah.
While we're talking about support, I'm going to add addendum to my minute. How can men support women? How can men be feminists? One example in the book is when she talked about the creepy manager and the Beastie Boys let him go. They believed her. They supported her. They did not enable his behavior. They did not overlook his behavior. I read How to Be an Anti-Racist, and it's not enough to just not say anything. Like, to be silent is to be complicit. And so the best thing that I think personally men can do is believe women, support them, don't enable this bullshit behavior. When there's toxic masculinity bullshit happening, don't participate in it and don't condone it. Because that's the shit that just keeps all this bullshit machine going.
I know.
And I think that, it doesn't have to be like a huge, you don't have to march in a fucking riot or some shit. Just like support women and believe them.
Yeah, exactly. Believe women.
Ultimately, this book really just kind of reinforced what I already thought about Kathleen Hanna, which is I thought she was awesome to begin with. I like her as a person. I think maybe what I learned is that she's not so like, she is a badass, but that doesn't mean she's always like this tough, hard person. She has this other side. She has a sense of humor. She can be fun. I learned that she's a mom. I did not know that her and Adrock adopted a child. There's a section about how she was having trouble conceiving, and they ultimately went the adoption route. And that is a part of their story that has largely been kept under wraps. And I understand for privacy reasons, you don't, show pictures of the kid or whatever. I get that. But I didn't even know that they even had a kid. It would be a significant part of someone's life. And so now she's got that angle going. But anyways, my final thoughts are just that this was a very good book. I went in liking her. I come out of it liking her. And like I said, the ultimate survivor for me was the Bikini Kill music, because I still connect with that. I never connected as much with La Tigra and Julie Ruin, but I still connect with that Bikini Kill music. And I still think she's just super fierce and super awesome. And the book did not dissuade me from those thoughts after reading it.
Shelley?
My final thoughts about the book and Kathleen Hanna are that she's a badass. I love and adore her. I so enjoyed the way that she wrote. So she reads the audiobook and she does a brilliant job of it.
Yes.
In fact, she just posted something recently on her Instagram about, it shows her reading the opening of the book in the booth, and she reads, the first couple sentences, and then the engineer, whoever, is like, how does it feel? Is there anything you want me to like turn down or change? And she's like, yeah, could you turn down that voice in my head repeatedly telling me I suck?
Suck. You don't suck.
I actually commented, I commented as Rock and Roll Book Club, and I was like, we loved this book and you decidedly do not suck. But I really appreciate how incredibly smart she is, how incredibly driven she is, courageous, creative, talented, all the things. And maybe most, like, overall, mostly how vulnerable she was in this book. And I know that's the point of a memoir, right? But there's so many things that she wouldn't have had to talk about that had to have been really hard for her to write and to read. And her sharing that vulnerability, I think, will educate a lot of people, will tell a lot of people that their experience is not just them, that it happens to a lot of women. And I think that out of vulnerability comes growth. And so that's what I see from this book. And I love her.
I'm in agreement with both of you. And, again, not having a huge background in punk, and the feminist punk movement, so to speak. I loved this book. This is probably, I would say this is one of my favorites that we've read. I love everything about her. I appreciate her and I thank her for sharing her story with us. And I encourage anyone that has any inkling to read it, to listen to it, to just make your acquaintance with this book because it's fantastic.
Yeah,
I
great
agree.
book. Great
Yeah.
book.
And if you're a guy, like, it's not going to make you feel like you're a piece of shit. Like, she is not anti-male, to be clear, at all.
No, there's none of that. And I mean, if you're a man and you're offended by some of these stories you're telling, then you're probably part of the problem. I mean,
Yeah.
you're, really,
Yeah.
there's no reason for you to be upset. That's kind of my whole attitude about Bikini Kill and about Kathleen Hanna, beginning with, why are you so fucking upset? Like, what's
Just
the real
listen to
hard part
something
to hear?
else.
What's
Go
the hard
something
part
else.
to hear? I mean, yeah, if you don't like it, listen to something
Yeah.
else.
So let's talk about our next book.
Yeah,
I'm
what's
really
next? What's next,
excited.
Shelley?
Ooh, let's talk about what's next. Our next book will be Ani DeFranco's memoir, No Walls and the Recurring Dream. This came out within the last year, I think. And I mean, talk about badasses. Ani DeFranco is a badass. And I know that currently. And I think I'm probably going to feel like that times 10 once I read this book. But really excited about it. She has a really interesting story. She was out on her own at a very young age. She moved to New York and was, a folk singer at 18. She just has an amazing story of how, grit and determination and talent have gotten her through. She today has her own record label, Righteous Babe Records. There are people on that label. If anybody's an Andrew Bird fan, he's on that label. She's just an amazing, talented, and incredibly prolific musician. And I will take this one opportunity to say and make a request from our viewers, which is that I'm prepared to put together an Ani DeFranco playlist for this book, but I have to be honest, and I am a bad Ani fan, and I have not listened to the last few records. So if anybody has ideas for tracks off of her later releases to put on that playlist, please let me know. Also, I'll throw out there that if you've already read this book and you have questions you want to throw at us, let's do it. Or if you have a totally other book you want to recommend, we are always taking those. So Ani DeFranco's next. Can't wait. Another one in the books.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much for watching. Please like the video. It helps with the algorithm stuff. Subscribe. We're now on Instagram and Facebook. The links are below. There's extra content we're going to be putting on there and stuff. And thanks as always for watching.
Yeah, and hey, if you're at a rock show, tell all the people around you about our show. They're music fans. Let's do this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.